Good morning. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. Welcome to the meeting of the Bills Committee on Ozone Layer Protection Amendment Bill 2024. At the last meeting of the panel on environmental affairs, we touched upon this item as well. I first welcome the administration to join us. The list has been uploaded online. We have Mr. Alan Lowe, Deputy Secretary for Environment and Ecology and Environment 2 from the EEB. We also have Mr. Leung Wai-man from the EEB, as well as representatives from the DOJ. We'll first discuss the bill, including the policy matters in relation to the bill. The administration has prepared a PowerPoint slide to walk members through the amendments. I'd like to invite the administration, Mr. Alan Lowe. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Leung Wai-man. He will walk members through the amendments. Thank you. Good morning. This bill seeks to amend Ozone Layer Protection Ordinance Cap 403 in relation to Kigali amendments. There are a total of 4 requirements under the Kigali Amendment. 1. Phase down the manufacture and use of scheduled hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, and implement the licensing and quota system on the import and export of the scheduled HFCs. There is also a requirement to report relevant import, export, and production statistics to the United Nations Environment Programme's Ozone Secretariat annually. Starting from 2033, there shouldn't be any trade with the non-parties of the Kigali Amendment. We can see the phase-down schedule on the screen. There is a phase-down schedule, as you can see on the screen. China needs to comply with the requirement in relation to Treaty 5. China needs to comply with the timeline, that is 20% of the baseline. From 2036 and thereafter, the phase-down target is 15% of baseline. That is the blue line, as members can see on the screen. HFCs have high GWP, global warming potential. HFCs are mainly used in air conditioning systems, refrigeration systems, as well as fire suppression systems. We adopt a 3-pronged approach to phase down the manufacture and use of HFCs. First of all, we will implement a licensing and quota system. We aim to bring the system into effect starting from the 4th quarter of this year. Control Strategy 1: implement licensing and quota system on the import and export of the scheduled HFCs and prohibit local manufacture of the scheduled HFCs. We prohibit local manufacture of the scheduled HFCs, regulate the import and export of the scheduled HFCs in bulk through a licensing system, and impose quota control on the quantities of the scheduled HFCs imported for local use. We will also ban the import of HFC 23, that is HFC with extremely high GWP. In relation to Control Strategy 2, we will regulate the supply of products and equipment using high GWP HFCs. We will regulate or prohibit the supply of P&Es using high GWP HFCs, which will drive down local HFC consumption at source. We will also make a new regulation to prescribe in a list certain P&Es using refrigerants or fire suppressants that contain high GWP HFCs. In relation to Control Strategy 3, we will mandate the recovery of refrigerants and fire suppressants and formula handling guidelines. We target to bring it into effect starting from the fourth quarter of 2026. We'll promote the recycling and the reclamation of refrigerants and fire suppressants by the industry that will satisfy the mid to short-term demand of the market without any compromise to the implementation of the Kigali Amendment. We prescribe any air conditioning and refrigeration equipment with HFCs or ODS containing refrigerants charged over 50 kilograms, any fire extinguishing equipment with HFC or ODS containing fire suppressant charged over 30 kg, and any conditioning and refrigeration equipment using refrigerants with flammability, higher toxicity, or high operating pressure as regulated equipment. We will also introduce handling guidelines on refrigerants with flammability, higher toxicity, or high operating pressure. Under Control Strategy 3, we will prescribe the relevant responsibilities of the regulated equipment owners and the relevant refrigerant or fire suppressant handlers. In relation to consultation, we started the relevant consultation starting from the August of 2021. The 2-month consultation was completed in the middle of 2023. It ran between July and September. The response was in general supportive. We consulted the ACE and the Panel on Environmental Affairs of the Legislative Council in February and October 2024, respectively. Members expressed support for the amendment. The bill aims to implement Control Strategy 1 in the fourth quarter of 2025 to meet the relevant requirement of the Kigali Amendment. The 2 pieces of subsidiary legislation for effecting Control Strategies 2 and 3 are to be introduced to the Council for positive vetting after the amendment bill is passed at the Council. We aim to implement them in phases starting from mid-2026. Next, in relation to the amendment bill, it seeks to amend the long title of the Ozone Layer Protection Amendment Ordinance so that the scope of the ordinance will cover the implementation of the Kigali Amendment, the proposed control on the scheduled HFCs and matters relating to the safe handling of refrigerants with flammability, higher toxicity, or high operating pressure. Add the scheduled HFCs as scheduled substances in a new Part 10 of the schedule to the OLPO. Prohibit the manufacture of these scheduled HFCs in Hong Kong. Control the import and export of the scheduled HFCs through the existing system of registration and licensing for scheduled substances. Amend and expand the regulation-making powers of the Secretary under Section 16 of the OLPO, and in particular to provide new powers to the Secretary to make 2 new pieces of subsidiary legislation to effect Control Strategies 2 and 3. And empower the Director of Electrical and Mechanical Services to exercise various powers and perform various functions under the ordinance, including the appointment of authorized officers to exercise their powers and perform the duties of authorized officers pertaining to the OLPO. increase the penalties for the offenses listed in CAP 403B. That concludes my introduction. Thank you, Mr. Leung. I now open the floor for members to ask questions in relation to policy matters. Members, if you wish to ask questions, please press the button to request to speak. Two members, Mr. Tong Li-Tse and Mr. Lam Chun-Sing. First round, 5 minutes. If need be, I will allow the second and the third round. First member, Mr. Tong Li-Tse. Thank you, Chairman. In principle, I support the Ozone Layer Protection Amendment Bill 2024. Global warming, extreme weather. We are seeing more frequent of these weather events. Different countries are facing this phenomena. We have super typhoons. In the US, there is forest fire or hill fire. All these are related to global warming. In relation to the emission of ozone-depleting substances, ODS, this is close to our heart. Our country is a party to the Kigali Amendment. It was brought into effect as early as in 2021. Why is it so late in Hong Kong? What is the reason behind this? Regarding the timetable, is it aligned with that of the mainland? Many products are state manufactured, so I'd like the administration to tell us more. As consumers, we are concerned about regulated or scheduled HFC products. Have you factored in the functions and the price on these products from the perspective of consumers? Just now you mentioned 3 control strategies. One, in relation to the import and export control of these HFCs. This is rather simple. In relation to control strategies 2 and 3, starting from 2026, implementation will start in phases. This is more complex than control strategy 1. Do we have sufficient time? Have we given sufficient regard to time? Why is Hong Kong so late? We discussed this in the panel on environmental affairs. Probably you can tell us once again in relation to alignment with the mainland China. Will there be no major problems? Next question. The framework doesn't cover everything.
Thank you. Mr. Alan Low. Thank you. I will briefly reply to the 4 questions. First, on the time frame. Now, by way of supplement, the HKSAR told the central government clearly that the obligation of compliance with the protocol would only apply to Hong Kong after the legislative process. Now, we know that after 2019, we were affected by the epidemic. The public consultation process was delayed as a result. Now, will the delay be a problem for us? Well, actually, if you refer to the slides just now, there are two timelines for phasing down the HFCs. As long as we can meet the two timelines, then everything will be fine. The second, according to the Kigali amendments, Hong Kong is a non-Treaty 5 signatory. In other words, we belong to the group of developed economies in the treaty, while our country belongs to Treaty 5 signatories. So there are different phase-down targets for the country and Hong Kong. Now, our timetable for fulfilling the HFC phasing down target is more aggressive than the country's. Now, concerning alternative products in the market and the readiness of the market, we have consulted the trade and gathered information on alternative products. Now, we believe that for refrigerants and fire suppressants, there are sufficient alternatives in the market. Now, in terms of home appliances which use these refrigerants and fire suppressants, there are price differences between models. However, by phasing out home appliances using refrigerants with HFCs, it will not lead to a price surge. Now, based on the market research, the bill will not lead to a huge price difference, while protecting the environment. I would defer to Mr. Leung Wai-man for the two other control strategies. Thank you. Control strategies 2 and 3 will be legislated by way of subsidiary legislation after the bill is passed. So regulations will be drafted after the passage of this ordinance. Now, the remaining two control strategies will be implemented by middle of 2026, depending on when the bill is passed. Mr. Tony Jie, any follow-up questions? Now, it seems to me that we don't even need to legislate for the law. And we can still fulfill our obligations. Now, is it solely because of the pandemic that we are experiencing such a delay? And second, I don't think the government is clear enough in terms of explaining the necessity and the contents of the bill to the members of the public. Mr. Alan Low, I think the member thinks the explanation given by you was not very comprehensive. Thank you. About supply of alternative products in the market. Manufacturers in the country and Hong Kong see the ASEAN and Western market as a major market. Mainland manufacturers have been offering products with low GWP or low global warming potential to the market for a long time. So I think the market would be able to adapt. Now, about the phase down targets, the ultimate target is to phase down the use of HFC by 85% from the baseline in 2036. That's the requirement in the Kigali Agreement or the Kigali Amendment. So with our legislative proposal, we will be able to meet that target. Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Are products from mainland manufacturers living up to the requirements in the Kigali Amendment? That's my question. We need to know if they are up to standard because that's very important if we want to fulfill our obligations under the Kigali Amendment. Have we talked to the country about this alignment of standards? Has the government conducted a study on this? From what I heard from Mr. Alan Lowe's answer, manufacturers in the mainland has a global market. The products are sold to not just Hong Kong, but other countries in the world as well. Since they are able to meet the standards of those markets, it should be up to standard for Hong Kong as well. I think that's what Mr. Alan Lowe means. But there was a question about control strategies 2 and 3. Mr. Leung said that subsidiary legislation have to be drafted for the remaining 2 strategies. However, back in 2019, because of the delay in public consultation, the amendments to the principal ordinance was only introduced this year. But were there any difficulties resulting in the delay in implementing control strategies 2 and 3? Thank you. The Kigali amendments required signatories to phase down, not eliminate the consumption of HFCs containing products. So that's why we are phasing down the use of HFCs with GWP in refrigerants and fire suppressants. We can achieve strategy 1 by prohibiting the local manufacture and regulate the import of exports of scheduled HFCs. Now, control strategies 2 and 3 targets the source of HFCs. Now, we will keep monitoring the type of products with mature low HFC alternatives and seek to regulate them only when there are alternatives. Now, for air conditioning system used in homes, according to our study, more than 90% of the air conditioning system are using low HFC refrigerants. Now, we need to amend the principal ordinance before we can be empowered to implement the remaining strategies by way of subsidiary legislation. So besides the main strategy, we have other measures to help the trade comply with the requirements in the Kigali Agreement so as to protect the environment. Chair, I was just worried whether there is enough time to meet the target because this amendment only comes a few years after 2019. So I hope you are simultaneously preparing for the implementation of strategies 2 and 3 because it takes time. So that's why I ask whether you are confident to implement the remaining 2 strategies in 2026. Now, since you are already working on this, I think there's still time for the strategies to be implemented after the passage of the bill. Members, we have sufficient time. That's why I am allowing more time for exchanges with the governments. If you have any more questions, I will allow a second round. Next, Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Thank you, Chair. I generally support the amendment, but I have some questions in relation to the training of air conditioning technicians and also the safety issues. Now, air conditioner repairing is not an occupation with high risk. However, there were news where the air conditioners exploded under maintenance. So we want to prevent this. And it would be risky if the entire market switched to using new refrigerants at the same time. Now, the government mentioned that air conditioners technicians must complete training courses before they can work on air conditioners using new type refrigerants. So how can you ensure that during the transitional period, there are sufficient training organizations offering training courses? Otherwise, the technicians cannot work. And also, will there be a continuing education requirement for the technicians? Now, for example, the green card at a construction site, there is a renewal requirement every 3 years. Construction site workers have to do the course again every 3 years. So will there be a similar requirement for air conditioner technicians? Now, for those technicians who fail to complete the course, will it affect their work? I believe this is not an entirely different skill set. These are mostly safety training and some tips. It shouldn't be too complicated. However, if technicians fail to complete the courses, will there be support given to them for redoing the course so that they can pass the test and handle air conditioners using new type refrigerants? Now, the bill doesn't specify the contents of the training courses to be offered to the technicians. So how will the government regulate the contents of these courses? I believe there is an advisory committee in the trade concerning this amendment. So will the advisory committee set down the scope of the courses? Finally, what are the legal responsibilities or liabilities for the technicians? After the regulatory regime kicks in, some air conditioning system using old refrigerants will not be allowed. So if a technician is asked to install or maintain these below standard air conditioners, will they have to bear legal responsibility, or will the owner or the contractors bear the legal responsibilities? 5 questions. Mr. Wong.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, member, for your questions. There were a total of 5 questions. First of all, on training courses, are there enough training courses? In September 2024, we set up the Refrigerant Technical Advisory Committee. This provisional RTAC has recognized a total of 2 organizations' courses. One, VTC. The other one is Construction Industry Council, CIC. They have submitted the courses for approval, and the RTAC has already approved these courses. There will be 3 more organizations and basically we have approved or recognized these. And there are a total of 3 organizations. One of them is Taikin Air Conditioning Hong Kong Limited. There are a few more organizations. They have submitted applications to the provisional RTAC in relation to the courses they can offer. We hope to provide sufficient training courses to the industry. Through the provisional RTAC, as I understand, there will be sufficient training courses for the market. In relation to the transitional period, are there sufficient courses? You mentioned some courses are being offered, whereas some are still waiting for approval. Indeed, the VTC and the CIC offer courses. They will launch courses in the first quarter of this year. Regarding the courses offered by other organizations, we expect they will be launched sometime later this year. In relation to CPD, yes, indeed, this is necessary. As per our arrangements, there will be a renewal arrangements every 5 years. During training, are we worried some skilled workers cannot pass the licensing examination and cannot renew their licenses? Well, our requirements cannot be too lax. After all, as it has to do with flammable gases or agents, we do need to put in place stringent requirements, but we believe eligible or skilled workers can pass the relevant licensing examinations and get the relevant qualifications. Regarding the details of training, we discussed them in the provisional RTAC. For the details, we'll provide further information in subsidiary legislation in relation to the responsibilities of workers. We are going to provide code of practice or practical guidelines. Workers will have to work and comply with these requirements. In relation to the handling of refrigerants, owners need to provide a safe place as well as safe equipment for workers. Refrigerant handlers need to employ workers with the relevant training and qualifications. Next, Mr. Brave Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, DS. We want to protect the environment. We want to protect our world. One of the requirements is not to trade the scheduled HFCs with non-parties on the Kigali Amendment. The U.S. basically doesn't partake in all these. We are revitalizing our economy. How does it impact on our efforts to boost the economy? It doesn't mean we won't proceed with this. It is their problem if they do not partake in these. The U.S. is a large market. In relation to the phase-downs schedule, there's a consensus for many countries. If the baseline is as far as 2036, will it be too long in time? comparing with other countries, such as developed countries or our country? Are we faster? If we are behind other countries, then other counterparts may question why we don't work faster. As stakeholders said, the impacts may not be too significant, or the difficulties can be overcome. We need to take into account the difficulties. We need to understand the greatest difficulties facing the industry. Have we made light of the difficulties? We consulted the market some time ago. There's volatility in the market right now. We need to give regard to the changes in the market. The purpose is to avoid any issues in the middle of the implementation of the amendments. DS. Thank you, member. There were 100+ countries having signed the Kigali Amendment. Some countries don't take part in it, and it is these countries' choice. Some countries have already made adjustments to products in order to comply with the requirement under the Kigali Amendment. At present, we don't have local manufacturers of HFCs. We aim to implement an import and export licensing control system, and it is only applicable to re-export. Around the world, many countries are implementing the Kigali Amendment, so we use HFCs or products with low GWP. Mr. Brave Chan is concerned about public consultation. From the views we have collected, most of them think that this is workable. In relation to the grace period or adaptation period, there should be more exchange of views. Just now, Mr. Leung mentioned the scheme didn't start only today. In the public consultation earlier, we discussed control strategies 2 and 3 with the industry. 90% of the views collected were supportive of the amendments. We'll be in touch with suppliers. Well, Mr. Brave Chan, any follow-up? This is quite encouraging. Is it possible to work even faster comparing with other developed countries? Are we leading or are we lagging behind? If we are lagging behind, we'll be subject to attacks or criticisms. DS, do we have statistics? Mr. Leung? Hong Kong follows other developed economies, and we use the blue line as the baseline, as members can see on the screen. That's the phase-down schedule. In 2036, we will phase down the use of HFCs by 85% from the baseline level. So we make sure we can meet the Kigali amendments like other countries or parties to the amendment. Is that the international standard? Yes. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai Kung. Thank you, Chairman. As members mentioned, we don't want to lag behind. We do want to start earlier, but because of different reasons, say there was turbulence in society back then, some members asked whether we can be more aggressive or we can make it faster. We do what we should do. I thank the administration for meeting with us and explaining to us the amendments. We had a better grasp of the amended ordinance. 2 questions. 1. The paper mentioned HFCs with low GWP. They have high toxicity. Practitioners need to undergo training. They need to handle these with care. I'd like to know whether there is any impact on the public. Many of these substances are stored in confined spaces, but there is a possibility of exposure in the event of repair maintenance and so on. Will that cause any impact on the public? That is what the public want to know. In relation to control strategy 2, rather it should be 1. That is paragraph 10 of the papers. At the end of paragraph 10, it reads, the importation of HFCs with extremely high GWP will be fully banned, such as HFC 23. The sentence that follows is safe for maintenance of ultra-low temperature refrigeration system and laboratory research. So I want to know, what is the impact on these exemptions? How significant is the impact? If these systems are the major users and we are granting exemptions, how much of an impact will it cause? Or will the impact be insignificant? I'd like to hear from the administration. DS, who would like to respond? Well, I'll take the second question and I'll give the floor to the EMSD in relation to the first question. Regarding HFC 23, the usage is on the high side. As I remember, between 1 kg and 2 kgs. As regards the exemption, there is still control. Reports have to be made to the EPD and approval needs to be granted by the department before it can be imported. Importers need to explain why this is the only solution. EMSD, Mr. Wong, these HFCs should be stored in well-ventilated spaces. Only in the event of accidents will there be exposure of the HFCs. In accordance with the international standards, long-term exposure to refrigerants will cause impact on health, say affecting the respiratory system, eyes, and skin. According to the national standard, long-time exposure refers to 8 days on a day and over 40 hours in a week. Only then will negative impact be caused. Thank you.
Thank you. Very clear. I think that's enough to reassure the public. And I believe that our professional technicians will have received safety training by then, and they won't be coming into contact with the HFCs 8 hours a day. Now, there is a reporting requirement with the United Nations Environment Program's Ozone Secretariat. Data on import, export, and local manufacture of HFCs will have to be submitted to the Ozone Secretariat. So how much will that cost the EPD and the government in terms of manpower? Now, if there is a regular information or statistics collecting exercise, I don't think that would add a lot of burden to the EEB. Mr. Alan Low, Mr. Kwok is right. This is just a requirement to report the statistics. We already keep tab of the statistics as part of our administrative work. Thank you. Now that it is my turn. The government has clarified many questions in terms of the policy. Members' main concern was whether, subject to the amendments of this bill, we will be able to fulfill the obligations on Hong Kong according to the egalitarian agreement. So the administration has assured us that we will be able to meet the timetable set by the UN. Another area of concern is whether it will pose additional operational cost on the market. There will be some pressure, but Hong Kong is not the only market of manufacturers of HFC. Since the prohibition on HFCs is already in place in other countries, the manufacturers should have adapted to it already, and there shouldn't be a big problem on the availability of products. Now, the quota, on the other hand, is a problem. Now, the ratio is set at 7:3 or 70:30. Now, for other prohibited substances, there is also a quota system. But for HFCs, we have a pyramid system as well as a free quota system and a 70:30 quota ratio. Now, if there are remaining quotas to be utilized by 2027, according to the paper, the quota can be transferred freely in the market, provided that the allocated quota has been used up. Then the importer or exporter can apply for more free quota. So do you foresee any difficulties in complying with the new system? Now, with the quota system in place, how can we achieve the ultimate target, that is to continuously phase down the scheduled substances? Now, in the consultation paper drafted by the administration, it was mentioned that a transitional producer responsibility scheme for refrigerants be put in place so that Hong Kong won't become a place where outdated air conditioners are dumped to. So without a producer responsibility scheme, how can we ensure that Hong Kong won't become a place where there is dump selling of outdated air conditioners? I don't see any mentioning of the responsibility scheme in the bill. I would defer to my colleague the question about the quota. Mr. Fong, thank you, Chair. It's mentioned in the paper that we have been adopting the quota system for ozone depleting substance. So the same system will be applied to scheduled HFCs. There are two major categories of quota. One, existing quota. That is to accommodate the operation of stakeholders trading in appliances using HFCs. The second part of the quota system will cater for newcomers in the market. We will reserve some quota for new joiners. Now we will phase down the use of HFCs in a stepped manner. We will be adding 18 products using HFCs in the amendment to fulfill with the Kigali Amendment. Now we calculate the standard using carbon dioxide equivalents. So we will make sure that these products fulfill the carbon dioxide equivalent targets. Concerning the quota, we will verify the usage of the allocated quota in the past year before deciding on the renewal of quota or allocating new quotas in the next year. Now, based on the free market principle, the quota is transferable in the market. We encourage fair play in the market and fair trade of a quota. There will be more announcements and a publicity campaign to educate the trade on the new system in the future. Now, starting from the initial implementation of the quota scheme, it has been 2 decades, and the trade has adapted to the mode of operation already. And I think the trade can adapt to the changes this time around just fine. What about the producer responsibility scheme? That was mentioned in the consultation paper. However, according to the trade, they don't think it is the time when we introduce this system. However, this would apply to strategy 3, that is mandatory recovery and reclaiming of HFCs. So the follow-up question is whether you have confidence that there will not be a dumping exercise in the market of outdated products during the transitional period. That was the concern that caused you to propose a producer responsibility scheme in the consultation period. So without the producer responsibility scheme, how can you ensure that the dumping scenario will not happen during the transitional period? Well, that is related to control strategy 2. We have set a timeline to prohibit the supply of products using HFC with high GWP. So we are not going to prohibit the sale completely because that would hurt the trade badly. So Mr. Tony Jie has indicated his wish to have a second round. I will give Mr. Jie 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. The Chairman has asked one of the questions I intended to ask. In Annex E, there is a list. It specifies 3 types of products where there is not a timetable for prohibiting their supply. Now, this includes air conditioning systems widely used in residential units, restaurants, and offices. Does the government intend to set a time target for prohibiting the supply of these air conditioners? I know the government is tapping the view of the market right now, but can you first tell us whether there is a timetable in mind to prohibit the supply of these air conditioners? If there is not a timetable, then that answered my question. If there is a timeline, but you can't tell us why, and when can you tell us the timetable? Deputy Secretary, timetable. Thank you. Actually, Annex E is quite clear. For import and manufacture, we propose to prohibit the import on the 1st of January 2027. Now, with that prohibition, these products will gradually disappear in the market. But we do not intend to set a time limit of supplying these air conditioners. Like I said, if importers have already imported these air conditioners into Hong Kong, then they will need time to clear their stock. So they need time to adapt. I understand that you need to give the trade some time to clear the inventory. But according to my memory, a deadline has been set for other substances as well. For example, microplastic beads. So if you ask the trade, of course, they would like to have an indefinite time for adapting. But at least tell us the time around which you are going to announce a ban on supply. You are prohibiting manufacturing of HFCs, but the ban does not apply to other countries. So, as we know, some countries have a habit of not following international protocols. We will work out a timetable with the trade within the year. So the administration will consider setting a timetable after consulting the trade further. The direction is to prohibit supply of the product as well, but the time frame is crucial. Next, Mr. Lam Chun-sing. We've talked about issues like prohibition on manufacture and import. Now, according to the paper, you are also going to mandate recycling of refrigerants and encourage recycling and reclaiming of refrigerants. You will encourage the trade to do this. In your mind, how effective will that be? Are all refrigerants suitable for recycling? Air conditioners for domestic or commercial uses, they use a wide range of refrigerants manufactured and designed in different years. So are they all suitable for recycling or recovery? And also, do we have sufficient recyclers or recoverers to do the job? Now, if a large amount of refrigerants is recovered, then we need storage suitable for storing dangerous substances. Are there enough storage houses or warehouses in Hong Kong for that purpose? Will that be a significant cost for the trade? So in terms of recovering and recycling refrigerants, I want to know what the government's progress is.
DS. I'll give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Fong from the EPD. In general situations, as the EMSD has already explained, HFCs are handled in confined spaces except there is repair when air conditioners have to be taken out. When we tighten requirements in relation to importation amounts, there will be an impact on the market. So there will be an incentive to recover refrigerants. There are dedicated machines, and there will also be training. Refrigerants will be put back into the system, say in special situations where the refrigerants are polluted, then recovery is not possible. For polluted refrigerants that cannot be recovered, they are chemical wastes, and they have to be handled in chemical waste centered. The recovery of refrigerants presents a great business opportunity, and there will be, some may consider having putting in place recovery in relation to these refrigerants. If the cost of recovering these refrigerants is high, probably some may think that this shouldn't be done. If refrigerants aren't recovered, the cost may be higher if you need to replace these refrigerants. There are, of course, exceptions. If refrigerants are polluted and they are not fit to be reused, then they'll have to be handled, or they have to be processed. It is important to have licensed professionals to go through the handling process. Any more members would like to speak on policy matters? If not, we have already finished policy discussion. Members may note, earlier on, the legal advisor sent a letter to the administration on the 10th of January. The administration has already provided a reply. Members may refer to CB /134/2024 and the administration's reply is LC paper number CB /195/2025-01. In clause-by-clause scrutiny, members may ask questions and discuss the administration's reply at the same time. Now I'd like to ask members, in relation to the amendment bill, do we need to invite the public to submit written submissions? In the public consultation conducted earlier on, the administration has already collected views from the industry. The administration said that they had already taken into account views from the industry, and the public is in general supportive of the bill. So do we still need to invite the public to attend public hearings, or as a few amendments are involved under the bill, do we need to invite the public to submit written submissions? Mr. Stanley Lee, Chairman, I don't think this is necessary. In my opinion, the administration said that they had consulted on ACE. There are experts in the ACE. I'd like to know the concerns and the views from the experts of ACE. I hope the administration can provide minutes of the ACE meeting for us for our reference. Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chairman. Referring to the document, there was a consultation exercise, but it's been close to 8 to 10 years. Well, I stand corrected, 2021. I misread the paragraph. I stand corrected. It hasn't been a long time since the last consultation. Well, I think it's sufficient to invite the public to submit written submissions. It's enough. There are a few years since the last consultation period. Probably the public or other bodies may have views on the bill. So perhaps we can invite the public to provide written submissions. We can ask the Secretariat to make the announcement online to invite the public to provide written submissions. As per the usual practice, the Secretariat will inform the 18 district councils. The written submissions received will be circulated to members. Then they will be forwarded to the administration for them to provide a consolidated written response. Now we proceed to clause-by-clause scrutiny. I suggest members use the Chinese text. The legal advisor will take a look at the English text at the same time. So let's use the copy LC paper number CB-13/2025-01. To make it convenient for participants at the meeting, please refer to the page number in the middle of each page. Please refer to the page number in the paper. Who will walk us through the bill? DS. I'll talk about the title as well as part 1. The title lists the purpose of the bill. I'm not going to repeat the same point as I have already covered it in my introduction. And short title as well as commencement. Other provisions will come into effect on the date when it is published in the Gazette. Clause 5, brackets 2, Clause 6, brackets 2, and Clause 22, brackets 2. They are in relation to the import and export control of HFC. We recommend the date of the 1st of October. We want to allow the public to make the relevant arrangements, so we recommend the date the 1st of December. Members, any view? No questions. I'll move on to the next part. Part 2. Well, DS, please read out the page number. Well, just a second, please. The paper I've got is not the electrical paper. Just a moment, please. We are referring to CB brackets 134/2025 brackets 01, the first page, 0001. Part 2. We replace the old long title with the new long title. We want to expand the scope of the ordinance in order to give effect to the implementation of Kigali amendments. In short, we want to expand the scope of the ordinance. During the legislative amendment process, we have received views from the DOJ. Hong Kong is not a party to the agreement. So we will make a change in order to make it more appropriate. That is in relation to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. We were referring to the Blue Bill C2702 or C2703 in the English text and 0001 on the marked up copy. Mr. Leung will then give a detailed explanation for the subsequent provisions. Then we move on to 0002. I'll carry on first. Next, move on to 0002. We propose to amend a few interpretations. We propose to delete domestic premises. We propose to amend the Chinese text. There's no change in the English text. In the Chinese text, we also make a proposed amendment in relation to import and export. The changes are only in the Chinese text. There is no change in the English text. Then moving on to director or secretary. Well, on 0002, it is secretary. The secretary means the Secretary for Environment and Ecology. We also propose to add a new interpretation, scheduled substance. It means a substance listed in the schedule, whether existing alone or in a mixture, but in sections 4 and 6, doesn't include a substance listed in the schedule. That is, in a manufactured product, other one used solely for the transportation or storage of the substance, and the substance is used in the operation of the product, or the mere dispensing of the contents of the product constitutes the intended use of the substance, or part of a manufactured product solely because the substance was used in the processing of manufacturing the product.
Allow me to briefly explain this. we are excluding the substance used in the operation of the product. For example, air conditioners. A regulatory regime seeks to control the imports of the chemical substance HFC rather than the import or export of an air conditioner using the HFCs. In other words, the movements of the air conditioner itself is not prohibited or controlled or regulated. Any views from members? Please continue. Thank you. Aircraft, vessels, and vehicles. They refer to the definitions given in the Import and Export Ordinance, Cap 60. Thank you. Authorized officer means an officer authorized under Section 9. More details will be given when we come to Section 9. Air transshipment cargo. It has the meaning assigned to it in Section 2 of the Import and Export Ordinance, Cap 60. As I mentioned, the transshipment or re-export of HFCs containing products are not part of our scope. Permit or license means a license issued under this ordinance. Please continue. Cargo transshipment area of Hong Kong International Airport has the meaning assigned to it in Section 2 of the Import and Export Ordinance, Cap 60. Import and export. They take the meaning given to them in Section 2 of Cap 60. Advisory Council on the Environment means the advisory body established by the Chief Executive to advise on matters relating to pollution control and sustainability of the environment. Hazardous refrigerants means a refrigerant prescribed by regulations made under Section 16(1) to be a refrigerant that constitutes a safety hazard. Specified fire suppressant means a fire suppressant that contains one or more scheduled substances. Similarly, specified refrigerant means a refrigerant that contains one or more scheduled substances, but does not include a controlled refrigerant as defined by Section 2 of the Ozone Layer Protection Controlled Refrigerants Regulation, Cap 403, B. Simply put, what is a specified or scheduled refrigerant? This is a refrigerant which we believe would harm the ozone layer. There are already existing regulations on this type of chemical substance. Thank you. The legal advisor has submitted a question concerning the definitions for specified refrigerant. Now, members of the public do not understand what a specified or controlled refrigerant is. They don't know the scope. So after the passage of the bill, the administration needs to clarify the matter by way of a code of practice or a publicity campaign. The public must be educated on what refrigerants is covered by the ordinance. Thank you. Ms. Judy Chan. Chair, I've read the legal advisor's opinion, and I have a question. If we use the definition or the term specified refrigerants and we are leaving out many types of refrigerants out of the definition, then can we adopt a similar practice in other legislation, for example, distinguishing the two with specified and non-specified refrigerants? Deputy Secretary, I think the law is clear For specified refrigerants, the regulations or the prohibitions imposed by the law applied on certain situations. There is no need to define non-specified refrigerants because the regulatory regime simply does not apply. Mr. Leung Wai-man, for the current prohibition on OSDs or ODS or ozone depleting substances, they are regulated under Cap 403B. Now, this bill seeks to control HFCs with global warming potential. So in order not to mix the two together, we propose to use the term specified refrigerant. So non-specified refrigerants simply means refrigerants which are not regulated by the law and out of scope. So those can be regarded as non-specified or non-controlled refrigerants. I think Ms. Judy Chan's question is similar to mine. If you just look at the wording of the bill, you will understand what it means. Well, actually, all refrigerants and all HFCs mentioned by the bill are controlled or scheduled. So essentially, you're adding one new category of stuff, but essentially it just means controlled or regulated. So I think we can draft the law with greater clarity. We understand how the regulatory regime works. The point is, in the future, in your publicity campaign and when you draft the code of practice, you need to specify clearly what scheduled or specified refrigerants mean. Ms. Judy Chan? I do foresee that we need to spend a significant amount of efforts in educating the public. I think the members of the public would be confused between the terms specified and controlled. Please continue. Next, HFCs or hydrofluorocarbon means a substance listed in Part 10 of the schedule, whether existing alone or in a mixture. Now, there are three definitions which are more simple. Montreal Protocol, Director of EP and Director of EMS. These are all defined by the relevant provisions. The legal advisor has a question. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I draw members' attention to Clause 41 of the bill. There is a technical amendment to the English text. So I draw members' attention to this because we can't miss this amendment. Now, about the definition for the refrigerants, subject to the passage of the bill, there will be two definitions for the refrigerants: hazardous refrigerant and specified refrigerant. Now, how does that compare to the existing refrigerants? Will they be subject to the same scope of regulation? And we have asked the administration about this. Now, for hazardous refrigerants and specified refrigerants, they will be subject to the regulatory regime in the bill. However, they are not interchangeable, so a refrigerator will not be at the same time a hazardous and specified refrigerant. So there are two separate legislative frameworks to regulate them. Now, for hazardous refrigerant, will the meaning duplicate with specified refrigerant? I mean, for specified refrigerants and controlled refrigerants, they are mutually exclusive. But what about hazardous refrigerants and specified refrigerants? Will they be regulated separately? Mr. Alan Lowe? Now, hazardous refrigerant is neither specified refrigerant or controlled refrigerant. So in other words, there is not, sorry, my correction, my apologies. Hazardous refrigerants and specified refrigerants are not mutually exclusive. I beg your pardon. However, specified refrigerants, I mean controlled refrigerants and hazardous refrigerants are mutually exclusive. So would it be easier to understand if there is a list? Yes, we will prepare a list afterwards. Yes, please do so for easy reference. Otherwise, our members would have a very difficult time communicating to the trade. Because of the different natures of refrigerants, sometimes the chemical substances of a chemical nature is not regulated by the law. However, there are some refrigerants with several natures existing at the same time, so we need to be very clear whether they will be subject to the control regime. Next, 004, Clause 3 of the bill. Offense to manufacture scheduled substances. It comprises two provisions. Subclause 1, a person who manufactures a scheduled substance commits an offense and is liable to a fine of $1 million and imprisonment for 2 years, and a fine of $100,000 per day for each day on which the offense continues. Subclause 2, Subsection 1 does not apply where the scheduled substance is manufactured solely for the purpose of research or academic instruction, and the person manufactures no more than 1 kilogram of the substance in any 12-month period. In other words, there is an exemption clause for manufacture of substance under 1 kilogram. I'll pause here. Now, with the addition of the list in Part 10, some members wondered whether the exemption would lead to unregulated manufacturing of scheduled substance. And also, we propose to provide an exemption that is other than a scheduled substance listed in Part 10 of the schedule. Any questions? Please continue. We propose to add subclauses 3 to 5. Subclause 3, in any proceedings for an offense under subsection 1, the burden of establishing that subsection 1 does not apply because of subsection 2 lies on the person charged with the offense. Subclause 4, for the purposes of subsection 3, a person is taken to have established that subsection 1 does not apply because of subsection 2 if A. There is sufficient evidence to raise an issue that the scheduled substance meets the description in subsection 2, and B. The contrary is not proved by the prosecution beyond reasonable doubt. We also propose to add subclause 5. For the purposes of subsection 1, a scheduled substance is not to be regarded as being manufactured if A. The substance is collected from any equipment, products, or container during the servicing of the equipment, products, or container, or before the equipment, products, or container is scrapped. And B. The substance is subsequently recycled by way of purification or distillation, or by any other way so as to make it suitable for reuse. Simply put, the scenarios cover recycling operations of HFCs. That is not an operation for manufacturing purpose.
顧問有意見。
Legal advisor. Thank you, Chairman. Members may note, in relation to Clause 3, it is a prescribed offense to manufacture scheduled substances. We did ask the administration, is this offense a strict liability offense? The reply from the administration is that it is a strict liability offense. In other words, the administration does not have to prove the mens rea of the offender. As long as someone does the act, then someone is criminally liable. Unless someone falls under the exception of subsection 2. We also asked the administration the common law defense of honest and reasonable mistaken belief. The defendant would have to prove such honest and reasonable mistaken belief on the balance of probabilities. And if someone has to prove with an evidential burden such honest and reasonable mistaken belief, what are the grounds? Can I ask the administration to explain? I'll give the floor to the DOJ. Thank you. Under subclause 3(1), if someone is charged with this offense, there are two situations where the defendant can raise a defense. One, a defendant may have an exception to cite, that is section 3(2). When someone manufactures the substances solely for the purposes of research or academic instruction, or under the common law defense, that is an honest and reasonable mistaken belief, then someone can use this as a common law defense. Usually, the evidential burden of the defendant is on the balance of probabilities. That would suffice. So when a defendant wants to provide a defense, then the defendant will have to provide evidence. In other words, the defendant has an evidential burden. I'd like to ask about subclause 5(b). That is, the substance is subsequently recycled by way of purification or distillation or by any other way so as to make it suitable for reuse. If there are the words by any other way, why do you still have to state purification or distillation? Is that redundant? Or do you have to specifically point out these two methods? Who will take this question? The EPD? Thank you, member, for your question. In relation to purification or distillation, there are two mainstream methods used by the industry, so we need to make it clear right here. For other methods, they are actually covered as well. Other possibilities are also covered. That's why we write it this way. Well, exactly my point is, if any other way is what you intended to mean, then you do not have to specifically point out these two methods. I am worried when reading this provision, people may have the impression that for these two methods, a heavier penalty may be imposed. Why do you still have to specifically point out these two methods? Well, there shouldn't be heavier penalties. DOJ, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, member, for your question. I'd like to say definitely there won't be heavier penalty, whatever the method of reuse is used. We specified purification or distillation because they are the mainstream methods used nowadays. However, technology develops by leaps and bounds. If there are further new technologies, we'll cover these technologies as well. Ms. Judy Chen, any follow-up? Well, I still find it not necessary. But anyway, that's my view. Well, from my perspective, reuse is the key word. And the mainstream technologies for reuse are purification or distillation. And that's a catch-all way to introduce other ways as well. Ms. Judy Chen means any other way is succinct enough. You don't have to specifically set up purification or distillation. Well, probably the administration can go back and discuss this point. That is, if you have already set up by any other way, this already covers purification or distillation. You mentioned a catch-all provision, but still, technology develops rapidly. Ms. Judy Chen means, can we make it simple? That is, by any other way, so as to make it suitable for reuse. That would be sufficient. That is not to be regarded as being manufactured. Thank you. Moving on to the page 0005. In relation to subclause 5 brackets 2, it will only come into effect on the 1st of December. So we propose to delete other than a scheduled substance listed in Part 10 of the schedule. Starting from the 1st of December, the provision will come into effect. Any question? No, let's move on. Moving on to 0006. Offense to import or export scheduled substances without a license. We propose to add brackets other than a scheduled substance listed in Part 10 of the schedule. So our ordinance doesn't apply to scheduled substances listed in Part 10 of the schedule. In 0007, Clause 6 brackets 2 will also take effect on the 1st of December. So we propose to delete other than a scheduled substance listed in Part 10 of the schedule. Alright, let's move on. Page 0008, we have made some proposed amendments. Brackets 1. We propose to add if the director of EP was before the commencement of this ordinance an importer or exporter of scheduled substances listed in Parts 1 to 9 of the schedule. Well, DS, hang on. Page 666 and 777. There may be misunderstanding. For pages 0006 and 0007, one with a schedule, the other no schedule, it may appear duplication of the titles. Is it the same clause?
哦，OK，明白明白，所以
Well, I understand. I understand now. It's clearer in the blue bill. Alright, let's move on. I'll start with 0008. Under clause 5 brackets 1, we delete where the director and we add if the director of EP. That is because we have included the director of mechanical, electrical, and mechanical services. So we need to specify the director of EP. Clause 5 brackets 1a. We propose to add listed in Parts 1 to 9 of the schedule. And after clause 5 brackets 1, we propose to add brackets AB was before the 1st of December 2025 an importer or exporter of scheduled substances listed in Part 10 of the schedule, or, that is brackets AB. And bracket 3, the director of EP may, at the time of registration or at any time after giving written notice to a registrant, impose conditions of registration that are reasonably related to brackets A, Hong Kong's compliance on the 1985 Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer, the Montreal Protocol, and any other protocols under the convention that apply to Hong Kong, or brackets B, the measures referred to in section 6 brackets 4 brackets B. Under clause 5 brackets 1, well, I'd like to pause here. Member, well, I propose to end the meeting after discussing clause 5 of the ordinance. Agree?
Clause 5. Subclause or subsection 5 brackets 1, we will delete the word where the director and substitute it with if the director of EP is satisfied that the person. So that's a change to cater for gender neutrality. We have also deleted subclause 3 to replace it with The Director of EP may, at the time of registration or at any time after giving written notice to a registrant, impose conditions of registration that are reasonably related to a. Hong Kong's compliance of the 1985 Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer, the Montreal Protocol, and any other protocols under the convention that apply to Hong Kong, or b. the measures referred to in Section 6(4)(b). Now, this amendment empowers the Director of Electrical and Mechanic and the Director of EMS, that is Director of Electrical and Mechanical Services. So we will specify clearly whether the Director of EMS or the Director of EP is responsible to exercising a certain power. Now, as Hong Kong is not a signatory to the Montreal Protocol, but the country is, so we have changed the wording to reflect that Hong Kong is only complying with the requirements, but the main responsibility is the country's. Now, the Director of EP is to issue a certificate of registration in a form specified by him or her to a person who is registered under this section, and the condition of registration under subsection 2 and any conditions of registration imposed under subsection 3 are to be set out in the certificate. Again, we need to delineate the power and responsibility to be borne by the Director of EMS. So we need to specify whether it is the Director of EP or the Director of EMS to exercise the power. So in subclause 5, the Director of EP will bear the responsibility. Now we have added the word if the Director of EP in subclause 6 to specify clearly that the subclause will be enforced by the Director of EP. Now we have replaced subclause 7 with if the Director of EP refuses to register an applicant, the Director is to serve on the applicant either by post or by electronic mail a notice stating the reasons for refusal. Again, this subsection will be enforced by the Director of EP but not the Director of EMS. And electronic mail is widely accepted as a means of serving a notice in the world, so we have added by electronic mail in subclause 7. Legal advisor. Thank you. Concerning the new 5(1)(a) in the Chinese text, it says 曾是, which means used to be or was. So it seems that the government is stressing the past capacity of as an importer or an exporter, as long as the importer or exporter has once been an importer or exporter, then they would be in scope. So do the importers or exporters have to submit proof that they were once importer or exporters to be able to register? Which government official will answer this question? Chair, if I may. For a registered importer or exporter, for any subsequent badge applying for import or export, we would refer to the past import or export record and the bill of lading to verify the amount imported or exported. The requirements and the practice is essentially the same as the existing ones. Now, concerning the time period, we will not just take the applicant's word automatically. We will require submission of proof. Now, the existing mechanism has been put in place for more than 10 years, so veterans in the trade are well aware of the requirements. For a newcomer, then they will have to submit proof to us that they have been importing or exporting the kind of products in the past. Now, we understand the administration's response to the legal advisor's question, but in the future, we foresee disputes arising from this because the word was is too loose. Let's say if an importer was in the business 10 years ago, but then it stops its operation for a significant period of time, so will the importer be regarded as an importer? There should be clear requirements and clear definition for the eligibility in course of practice so that we understand what does it mean by was an importer or exporter. Now, I know your legislative intent is that for importer or exporter who is an importer or exporter, when the law takes effect, then they would be eligible for registration. So for eligible applicants, as at the time when the law passed, they will be allowed to register. Is that what you mean? But if you say anyone who was an importer or an exporter would be allowed to register, then it would be very different. Thank you, Chairman. We will consider your suggestions after the meeting. Now, being an importer or exporter in the past is only one of the conditions. The director of EP has to satisfy that a person has been engaging in the business in the past. So if we set the snapshot at the time when the law takes effect, it may also give rise to disputes. So we need to reconsider the matter. Yes, please do. We need to rationalize the several scenarios we have mentioned. Any questions about Clause 5? There being none, we will suspend the clause-by-clause scrutiny here. For matters raised by members, I invite the administration to provide us with supplementary documents in writing. Now, AOB. I would like to consult members on the next meeting date. Upon consulting the administration, the Secretariat has reserved 2 slots for members. Now, we will confirm the dates later. First, Monday, 17th of February, 9:30 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. If a third meeting is needed, it is tentatively scheduled on Tuesday, 25th of February, 9:30 to 12:45. A notice of meeting will be sent to members in due course. There being no other matters, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.